one, the integrated question of the writing section. And today we'll look at the second question. Okay, guys, so it's the independent question. So we'll be looking at that question today. And so let's see. Okay. So this is what we were saying, right? In the writing section, we have two different questions. The first one is the integrated question, the one that we were doing this past 3 days, where you have to first read an article, then listen to the lecture and summarize it for 20 minutes. And now we'll see the independent question. Now this question, it's called an independent one because you won't have to be summarizing anything really. It will be basically based on your opinions, your thoughts, your own ideas. So you will have to write about whatever it is that you want to write. And it's a little bit longer than the previous one because this one lasts 30 minutes. So it's half an hour that you'll be spending in the independent writing. Guys? So let's see. Now, this is, by the way, very similar to the speaking section, in particular to the independent speaking task. The rubrics are the same that we already saw for the integrated. They still evaluate your responses based on the different categories we talked about, right? Including topic development, including language use, including organization, connections. So let's see. Okay, guys. So here in the independent writing, basically they will ask you a question. They will give you a prompt. Where they ask a question. It's always going to be a closed question. That means that it has only two possible answers. And it is about a debatable familiar topic. So it's going to be something related to everyday topics, things related to education, lifestyle, technology, work, finance, the environment, everyday topics. Okay? The format is pretty simple to understand. You get the question on top of the screen. And after you hear the question, you have 30 minutes or half an hour to write your response. Okay? So it's that simple. The format is very simple. Now, the types of questions that you can get are the same, by the way, that we have in the independent speaking section. So as I was telling you, these are closed questions. So the first type is called the agree or disagree type of question. And basically, they ask you if you agree or disagree with something. So Araceli, could you please read the first question here?
Okay. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Online education is better than the traditional one.
Okay, thank you, Araceli. So as you guys can see, they give you a statement. This is an opinion, right? A statement, a claim. And they ask if you agree with the claim, that means if you think the same way, or if you disagree with it. So if you actually don't think that that's true, right? So what you have to do is choose a side, whether you agree or disagree with that statement, whether you support or you don't support that claim, and explain why you support or you don't support that special opinion, okay? But this exact same thing could come in different ways. So we have a different type of question as well. This is called the preference question. So Alexandra, maybe could you please read the second question?
Sure. Some people prefer to, others prefer. Which option do you prefer?
Good. So basically in this type of question, they give you two different options and you gotta choose one of them. Now, if you guys think about it, you can have the same options as for the previous questions, right? So it could be something like some people prefer to take online courses. Others prefer taking traditional classes. Which option do you prefer? Right? So at the end of the day, it's very similar to the previous question. You gotta choose between online education or traditional education. This is not as common as the agree or disagree question, which is usually the most common one. And finally, there are a few chances in which they give you more than 2 options. So for example, they can say, which of the following do you think is better? Do you think is most important for students? And then you have 2 or 3 options to choose. So maybe you have option A, I don't know, online classes, option B, traditional classes, and option C, a mix between the both of them. So at the end of the day, what you have to do is the same. No matter what type of question you get, what you guys have to do is answer the question, choosing one side, choosing one option among the ones that they give you. And in your response, you're supposed to explain why you feel that way, why you have that opinion. Okay, guys? Do you have any questions so far about this? No. Okay, guys? Then without further ado, let's just start looking at an example. And that way we're gonna learn how to actually write the essay. I'm gonna give you guys some tips. So let's take a look at an example. See. So by the way, something that I was gonna say, one really important tip that I can give you guys, in order to improve your writing skills, to be honest, the best thing you can do is read. You know, I really think that, you know, and it's true, you know, reading is really closely related to writing, same way as listening is related to speaking. So when you're trying to improve your speaking skills, the best way to do so is by listening to different types of content. And the best way to improve writing in this case would be to practice reading this type of content, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share with you guys a PDF that I have with a lot of, I don't know how many, it's probably around 100 different sample responses, sample essays for this particular question. And I really suggest that you guys read one essay every day. You know, you don't really have to do anything but read. And just by reading, you're gonna notice that you're gonna start improving your vocabulary. You're gonna learn phrases with context related to these topics that you get in the TOEFL test. Also, you're gonna improve your writing itself, right? And things like grammar, punctuation will improve, spelling, even the ideas will be, it will be easier for you guys to come up with different ideas related to these topics. Yeah, so before class, like 5 minutes before we end today's session, I'll be sharing that document with you. But for now, let's start with the first exam. So, Pansy, please, could you read the question we have here?
Okay. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Sometimes it's better to be dishonest with people than to always tell them the truth. Use specific reasons and details to support your answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Pansy. So that's gonna be our first example. Now, as you guys can see, this is an agree or disagree type of question, right? And we have a claim in here that says sometimes it's better to be dishonest than to always tell the truth. And then they ask you to use specific reasons, details to support your answer. So what we're gonna do after we read the question is we're gonna take 3 minutes. Remember that you have a total of 30 minutes to answer the question, right? And to write your essay. So we're gonna take 3 of these 30 minutes in order to outline the essay. Okay, we're gonna take 3 minutes, in order to do some brainstorming, do some thinking about what exactly we're gonna talk about in our essays. And this is really key, because if you guys don't do this, then it's more likely that when you start writing the essay and you didn't make an outline, then you're probably gonna risk being repetitive. You may end up not having enough ideas to go with that specific option. So it's always better to have an outline, to have something prepared before you start writing the essay. Because otherwise you're gonna get lost in the middle of the essay and you'll be too late to start again. So let's plan our essay. During these 3 minutes, you're gonna maybe take a few notes. And what we're gonna do is, first of all, of course, we're gonna answer the question. We're gonna decide what side we're gonna go, what we're gonna support in defending our essence, right? So what do you guys think? Should we say that we agree with this statement or that we disagree with it? Is it better to be dishonest sometimes, or is it better to always tell the truth? What do you guys think? Which option should we choose?
I disagree with this statement.
Okay, so you think it's better to always be honest, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's perfect. So let's go with that one. You have to keep in mind that it doesn't really matter what you write about, right? It doesn't matter what your opinion is, which side you go for. They really don't care about, they're not trying to judge your opinions or your way of thinking. So it doesn't matter which option you choose, you can still have a great essay for both. And most of the time, to be honest, you can use the same reasons for both. But in this case, let's go for disagree. So we're gonna say that we disagree and we think it's better to always tell the truth. Okay, guys. So aside from deciding what you're gonna write about, you guys need to think of 2 different reasons why you feel that way, or 2 different reasons to use as evidence for that position. So can you guys tell me why it's better to always tell the truth? What could be one reason?
The truth always comes out at the end.
Perfect. The truth always comes out. And can you guys think of another reason? Mateo?
People will not think that you are a dishonest person.
Okay, okay. All right, the truth always comes out. Like, do you mean that you will become more of a reliable person, maybe? Trustworthy?
Yes.
Right? So it's better to always tell the truth in order to be more reliable, more trustworthy, maybe. Adriana, do you have an idea?
Yeah, maybe telling the truth is a good way to empathize and build good relationship. A good relationship, yeah.
Okay, good. Build good relationships. I like that idea as well. We're gonna write it down. Jose?
What about clear conscience?
Okay, all right. Having a clear conscience, not feeling guilty, right? Okay, guys, great. So it's really good when you can think of different reasons, and then you have to analyze a few factors, a few things. So the first thing that you guys wanna do when you have come up with a few reasons for your opinion is to choose 2 of them. Now, how do you choose the best 2 options out of the ones that you have? You need to make sure that the 2 reasons that you're gonna give, because in your essay, you just have to give 2 reasons. So you need to make sure that the 2 reasons that you're choosing are completely different from one another, that they are not related at all, that they are not similar, and that they are not gonna make you sound repetitive when you write about them, okay? So for example, if we look at option 2 and 3, at reasons 2 and 3, if you think about it, they are really related, right? So building good relationships basically involves being a reliable and trustworthy person, right? So being reliable, being trustworthy is all around the way that you relate to other people. So it's related to relationships, right? So let's say that you choose to write about these two reasons, so reasons 2 and 3. What will happen is you will end up being very redundant, and you will be writing about the same thing at the end of the day. It'll be hard to come up with evidence, and examples, and details. So it's better to always do this outline, do this brainstorming, and choose 2 options or 2 different reasons that are completely unrelated from one another. So let's make instead of having reasons 2 and 3, let's make it just 1. In that way, we can eliminate the third option. Because they are related, right? If we talk about being reliable and being trustworthy, we're also talking about building good relationships. So let's leave it as one reason, as one option. And then we have to choose 2 reasons, right? Out of these 3 that we have. Another thing that you guys need to think about is how easy is it to prove what you're saying in these reasons? Can you guys think of examples, of details, of any evidence of what you're saying? Because it is actually true that there are some reasons that are easier to elaborate on and to explain than others, right? So for example, if you have reason number 4, that's like, you have to be honest because, I don't know, it's a good value to have, right? So maybe if your reason is just based on value, although that may be a good reason, that's something that's really hard to justify, right? It's something hard to elaborate on, because you're gonna say that, yeah, you gotta be honest because it's an important value, but what else are you gonna say about that, right? It's hard to show evidence, it's hard to prove that point, because it's something very subjective, right? Values. So I would not go for that option, for example, right? So you gotta go for the ones that you think are easier to explain, easier to elaborate on, and you need to make sure that the 2 reasons that you're choosing are completely unrelated. So now that you know that, which ones should we choose? What do you guys think? What I would say is that if you guys think about it, number 1 is also related to number 2, right? Because the fact that the truth always comes out means that when you lie and the truth comes out and everybody finds out that you've lied, then you become an untrustworthy person, right? So people won't trust you, people won't rely on you, won't have good relationships. So I think that that's related to reason 2. So I would maybe go for these 2 ones, right? I would talk about one reason being having good relationships, being a trustworthy person, and the fact that the truth is always going to come out no matter what, sooner or later. And I would focus or address the other reason as something for yourself, right? So you have to be honest in order to have good relationships with other people. And you also have to be honest in order to have a good relationship with yourself, right? And to be in peace, to have a clear conscience, to not feel guilty, and so forth. So if you think about it, those are like 2 different ways of approaching this question that are not related to each other, right? So that's what I would do. And that's what you guys have to do when you are outlining and brainstorming and deciding what you're going to talk about in your essay. You need to make sure that the reasons that you choose are unrelated, they're not the same, they're not similar enough, and that they're easy to explain. And if you guys can't think of reasons, then you can always try thinking about the other side, right? Because remember that you don't necessarily have to write what you really think about this topic. You actually just have to write what you think is easier to write about, right? Don't go for your truest opinion, but instead go for the easiest one, okay? The easiest thing to support. So is this okay? Do you guys have any questions about this? No questions? Okay, so that's the outline. It's not going to take you more than 3 minutes, but it is really important that you guys do it. So after you've done your outline, then it's time for you to start writing. So let's get to it. This is going to be the template we'll use. And as I always say, you can change the template if you want. That's not a problem. You can change a few reasons, you can change the transitions, but the important thing is that you keep the structure, of the template and the essay. So what we're gonna do for this essay is we're gonna have a total of 4 different paragraphs. We will have an introduction first, which is the first paragraph. We will have the body. You have 2 body paragraphs. And finally, we have the conclusion. Having a conclusion here is important. It's not the same as the integrated writing. You do have to have a conclusion here. So that's the way we're gonna go. We have an introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and the conclusion. And that's a total of 4 paragraphs. Guys? So let's start in the introduction. What do you have to do in the introduction? Let's see. So there are actually 3 basic things that you need to have in the introduction. You may have more, but there are 3 essentials. The first one is some context related, where you explain what the topic of the essay is going to be. The second one is your opinion. So this is the direct answer to the question. Or this is also called the thesis statement, okay, where you give your opinion, where you talk about the main claim. And finally, you need to have a transition sentence. And those are the 3 basic sentences that your introduction has got to have. Some context, your opinion, which is your direct answer to the question, and a transition to move forward to the body of the essay. You guys? Now, the first tip that I'm going to give you guys, and I think I already said this when we were talking about the previous essay, remember this is not a creative essay, right? So if you have something that you feel is boring, that's okay. They are not trying to evaluate your creativity, right? This is not a piece of creative writing. So I've seen a lot of students try to like have a very interesting introduction, try to have a hook. So one sentence that catches the reader's attention, but that's really not necessary, okay? This is just academic writing for you to show that you can write, that you can express ideas well, coherently, concisely, and that you have good grammar, vocabulary, a good way of connecting ideas, and so forth. So this is just to show that you can write, okay? It's not about how creative or interesting your essay is. So that's the first thing that you guys gotta keep in mind. And the second is that, to be honest, your introduction and your conclusion, they are just there for format. You don't really have to waste a lot of time in the introduction and conclusion because it's a waste of time. The most important part is the body, okay? Always the body, the 2 body paragraphs. That's the most important part of the essay. The introduction and conclusion, again, are just part of the format. You gotta have them, but they are not as important as the body. So you shouldn't be spending too much time there. Okay? So those are the 2 tips that I wanted to give you guys. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, guys. So let's go back to the introduction. We're saying that in the first sentence, you should talk about the topic in general. So you need to give some context as to what the topic of this essay is going to be, which is obviously going to be the same topic as for the question. So what you're going to do for that sentence is go back to the question, read it again, and ask yourself, what is the topic of this question? And I am not asking you to like go for the opinion, right? Because your answer to the question is going to be that it's better to always tell the truth. But that's not really the topic of this essay. So in one word, what do you guys think the topic of the essay or the question is?
It is better to be dishonest with people.
Okay, but that's not the topic again. That's part of the options, right? In one word, only one word. What is the key word here? The most important word in this
Honesty, maybe.
Exactly. Honesty. That's the topic, right? Honesty. So what I would suggest is remember that the topics are usually the same, right? As I was telling you before, you have education, work, lifestyle, and health. So that means diets, working out. You have finance, technology, the environment, relationships. This one here is related to relationships, okay? As I was telling you before, you have the same topics. So my suggestion would be, try to always have one sentence for each topic. That's gonna be the first sentence in your introduction, so that no matter what topic you get, you're kind of ready already for this first sentence and you don't have to do a lot of thinking. So in this case, this is about relationships, right? As you guys said, it is about honesty. But if we go like a little bit deeper, a little bit beyond the main topic, which is honesty, we know that honesty is part of the way we relate to other people, right? Because we're being honest with other people. So, so in that case, I would maybe try to have kind of like a prepared sentence for whenever you have something that's about relationships. It does not necessarily have to be this exact same question, but if you have another question, for example, that's like, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? And maybe it is, friends have more influence on teenagers than their parents, for example. So again, that's about relationships as well. So you could technically use the same sentence for both introductions. I don't know if you guys get that idea. So in this case, for instance, what I'm saying is, in this first sentence, what you have to do is give some context, right? So basically talk about the importance of the topic. Talk about how important it is to talk about this topic. So we can write about honesty. We can say something like, most people would agree that, and here we can say something like, defining one's values is of paramount importance, for example. Right? So here I'm just talking about values. Most people would agree that defining one's values is of paramount importance. But if we go a little bit farther and we talk about relationships in general, then we can say something about relationships, right? So most people would agree that maybe defining one's values in terms of how we relate with other people is of paramount importance for, you don't necessarily have to use this for, but if you want, you can narrow it down a little bit more, right? So for our development, or for, I don't know, for our society, right? It could be. So in this case, look at how I'm talking about relationships, right? Or we could just say most people would agree that the relationships we have are or have a big influence on our development as human beings, for example. And you can use that sentence for this question here, or for any other question which is related to that big topic of relationships, right? If you had a question that's about the question that I just gave you as an example, right? Like, do you think that parents have more of an influence on teenagers than their friends? So you can use the same sentence for your introduction, right? Most people would agree that our relationships have a big influence on the way we, or in our development. So you can use the same. Same thing if it's something related to work, for example. If you have the question, do you prefer to work alone or in a group? Or if you have the question, do you prefer to work in the mornings or in the afternoons? Do you prefer to work from home, or do you want to go to your office? For those three questions that I gave you as an example, you can use the same introductory sentence here. You could say something like, most people would agree, or maybe we spend 1/3 of our lives working, right? That could perfectly fine be the first sentence for your introduction, no matter which topic you get or which question you get, as long as it's related to work, you know? So that's the tip that I'm giving you here. Make sure that you have one kind of pre-prepared sentence that you're gonna use for each different topic that you have. One for relationships, another one for work, another one for education, another one for technology, another one for the environment, finance. Okay? That's really important so that you guys don't waste time thinking about what to write in that first sentence, because I know that it can be a little bit hard to come up with ideas. Okay, guys? Is that okay? Do you guys know do you guys see what I'm saying? Yes, do you have any questions so far?
Maybe just so we could leave this first sentence in a general way, but also could we go directly to the point, like saying, defining one's value in terms of how honest we are with with other people, or do you suggest to keep it general at the beginning?
I mean, I didn't quite get what you're asking. So are you saying if we could cut this part?
No. I'm saying that exchanging that part in terms of how, instead of relate, I mean, how honest we are with each other.
Mhm.
So, going directly to the point, or do you suggest to keep it general, like relationship, in that kind of sense?
Okay. So actually, great question. Both are perfectly okay. You can go bigger if you want, so talk about relationships in general, or you can be a little bit more specific and just talk about how honest we are with each other. Both are totally fine. The tip that I was giving you is maybe you can have one that's for relationships, so that no matter what type of question you get, as long as it's within that category, then you'll be able to use it. But of course, it's totally fine to be a little bit more specific and just go directly to the point of the question, right? Which is honesty. So both are okay. The only thing that you should avoid doing is answering the question already or talking about one of the different options. So if you say something like most people would agree that it's always better to be honest, then that would be wrong because you're going directly to your opinion, right? So as long as you say something in general, then that maybe most people would agree with, something like a fact maybe, is okay.
Thank you.
Exactly. So, yep, we have those two options here. Any other question for this first sentence? Okay, guys. Now that's really an important thing to have. Usually the hardest one, but then everything else gets easier. The second sentence should basically just be your opinion, which is you answering the question they ask directly, as direct and as easy to understand as you can. This cannot really be something complicated to read. Try not to add too complex grammar in the second sentence. Try not to go in circles or paraphrase the sentence too much, because I've seen cases in which students want to paraphrase the statement so much that they end up changing the meaning. Okay, but it is really important that in your introduction you answer the question directly, that it's clear by the moment that the reader reads your introduction what your opinion and what your answer is. And that's what you're going to do in the second sentence. Answer the question as directly as you can. Of course, you can paraphrase a little bit. We're not going to copy and paste and say, personally, I'm convinced that it is always better to tell people the truth rather than sometimes being dishonest with them. Maybe we will want to change a few words, change the structure a little bit, but the meaning has to stay the same. We still have to say that it's better to always tell the truth, right? You can use different words if you want, but the meaning has to be the same. So we're going to say, personally, I am convinced that, and here we write our opinion, our answer to the question. So what do we write? What do
It
you
can be
It can be.
It can be, I'm convinced that be honest with others can improve our relationships, can be.
Okay. So let's actually use this as an example. Well, first thing, be careful with grammar. Remember, you have to use a gerund when the subject of your sentence is a verb, right? So you're using the verb to be as the subject of your sentence. You're talking about the action of being honest. So don't forget the grammar part, use a gerund. But as for the content, okay, could it be this phrase, being honest with other people, with others can improve our relationships? No, not really. Why? Because we are not directly answering the question. The question doesn't say, do you agree or disagree that being honest with other people can improve your relationships? That wasn't the question, right? The question is not about whether being honest or not can improve our relationships. The question is whether being honest always is better than lying sometimes. So you cannot go somewhere else. You have to try to answer the question as directly as you can. And try not to include your reasons yet. So in the introduction, I really don't suggest that you guys include your reasons. So I know that improving our relationships and building good relationships is going to be part of our body because we're going to include our reasons in the body. So in your introduction, try not to talk about your reasons. So we're just going to say, I'm convinced that being honest is always better, or maybe we could say it's always preferred. No, it's always the best option, or let's just say better than lying, right? No matter, maybe we can change things a little bit, and we could say, I'm convinced that no matter the circumstance, being honest is always better than lying. For example, okay, of course you can do it differently, but the important thing is that in this sentence, you answer the question directly. The question is being honest always better than lying sometimes, or is lying sometimes better than being honest always? So the important thing is that you answer this question directly. Okay? Is that okay? Guys? And finally, I really suggest that you guys have some synonyms for the saying better, because it's something that comes up a lot in the questions, right? So maybe you can say it's always the ideal option, or it's always preferred rather than lying, or will always be the best decision. I don't know. So you can have maybe some ways to paraphrase that, because it's something that comes up a lot. But the important thing is that you answer the question directly. And this is the second sentence. And finally, we have the transition sentence, which you just have to memorize. You can change it if you want a little bit, no problem there. But the important thing is that you have a transition sentence where you say, I have this opinion, I think this way, for two different reasons that I'm gonna explain in the. You just need to have that. In this case, I have this phrase here that says, I hold this opinion for two reasons, which shall be addressed in the following paragraphs. You can change a few words if you want, no problem. But the important thing is that you do have the transition and that you do not mention the reasons. I am not mentioning what my reasons are. Okay? And those are the three sentences that your introduction needs to have. I know they're basic, but remember that it's not that important. So you shouldn't be spending too much time here. Okay, guys? Is that clear? Any questions about this introduction?
I think it's clear, Andrea.
Okay, great. So let's paste this somewhere else. Okay. Now, as for the body of your essay, well, let's talk about what you have to have in the body first. So what you have to have in both body paragraphs is exactly the same, but we are gonna do some changes. So they're not gonna be exactly the same either. The elements are gonna be the same, but we're gonna use them in different ways. So let's talk about the first body paragraph. Okay, let's only talk about the first. So in the first body paragraph, what you guys need to have, first thing is your reason, right? So you need to clearly mention your reason. Your first reason, right? We're talking about the first body paragraph. Now, this should also be clear, almost as clear as this part in your introduction. Don't make it too complicated. Don't use too complex grammar here that makes it hard to understand. It should be as clearly as possible. So in this case, for example, here in the first sentence, we would be saying, to start, by being honest, you become a reliable, trustworthy person, and in turn are able to build better relationships with the people around you, right? For example. So in the first sentence, you just state your reason, the one that you thought about. In the second sentence, you need to explain that reason a little bit more. Or when I say explain the reason a little bit more, is try to narrow it down a little bit. So try to make it more specific into one situation. Try to maybe explain how. You can explain why, how, when, where, in which situations, to what extent. So you can try to answer those questions. Okay, one of these, right? You don't have to answer all of them. But basically, you're narrowing the topic down. So for example, if in the first sentence, we're going to talk about relationships, we said, right? So we will say, to start, by being honest, you become a reliable person, worthy person, which in turn are able to build stronger relationships. Okay, so for example, let's say this is a reason, right? By being honest, you become a reliable and trustworthy person, and in turn are able to build stronger relationships. This is the reason we thought about, right? Now, in the second sentence, what you have to do is explain one of these things. So you can tell me how. How is it that by being honest, you have better relationships? In this case, I think it's pretty obvious, right? It's because people trust you more. So I wouldn't maybe answer that question. You can explain why. Maybe you can talk about the importance of trusting your friends, for example, right? Or trusting the people that you have around. Maybe you can talk about when, where, in which situations, and try to narrow this down to a specific context. So for example, here we're talking about this in general, right? If we want to go a little bit farther, we can explain when, where, in which situations. We could say, for example, in fact, and now we can talk maybe about friendships only. So in fact, maybe it is widely known that when choosing a friend, honesty is one of the first qualities that we look for example, right? So I'm gonna write it down, for example. Right? So this is just an example. What I'm doing here is, in the first sentence, I'm talking about the reason in general, right? Being honest makes you build stronger relationships. And in the second sentence, I am narrowing it down to one specific context, friendships, right? So you can do that. You could also change the context to maybe romantic relationships, right? You can say, in fact, it is widely known that, I don't know, lack of honesty is one of the main reasons why most romantic relationships fail in the long term, for example, right? So that's another context that you can give for for your reason. So what I mean is, in the first sentence, talk about the reason in general, relationships in general. And in the second one, you explain a little bit, being a little bit more specific, right? So maybe with friendships, maybe we can talk about romantic relationships, as I said, talk about the fact that lies are the reason why most relationships fail. You can talk about professional relationships if you want. You can say, in fact, in the workplace, it has been demonstrated that people who are known as honest have better opportunities at being promoted, for example, right? So you can try to narrow this down, or you can explain how, why. But the important thing is that you go a little bit farther. You cannot have very superficial ideas. You have to start big, start with the general idea, and then go a little bit more specific as you go. Is that okay? Does that make sense? So what do we say? Any ideas for this second sentence? Okay, maybe we can talk about friendships and romantic relationships, right? Maybe you can say, in fact, it is widely known that lies are, I don't know, that lies are the first, or one of the main reasons why romantic relationships, friendships fail in the long. Okay, so that could be an example. Okay. We could also talk about what you guys were mentioning, right? About the fact that lies, I mean, the truth always comes out. Maybe we can talk about that as well. We can say, in fact, the truth always comes out sooner or later. And when it does, it is known that lies, or that finding out the truth, is one of the reasons why relationships fail, right? Maybe some ideas, okay? It's completely up to you where you want to direct this to. But the important thing is that you have to go a little bit farther. I'm not telling you to repeat the same idea here, right? I'm just saying to say something beyond what you already said in the first, a little bit deeper, okay? Any questions so far?
Yes, so, well, we explained the reason, and after that, we go directly to the personal experience, right? That would be the third step.
Exactly.
And that should be connected with the previous one. I mean, we should explain something related to this romantic relationships or friendship.
Yes.
Or to be related. Okay.
Sure. So yes, exactly. Now the third step, the third sentence, not really sentence, the third element, because what you were gonna have here is supposed to be the longest part of your paragraph. So the third step is to give some evidence. Now this is usually the part that we're gonna change and we're gonna do different in each body part. Okay. Now my suggestion is, for the first body paragraph, try to use, because we have to prove what we're saying, right? We're saying that being honest helps you build better relationships. So we gotta find a way to prove that. We have to provide some evidence. We cannot just say that without proving our point. So there are different ways to give evidence. There are different ways to prove something. Given that this is a personal essay, and they are talking about your personal opinion, so our opinions are mostly based on our experiences, right? We know that. So that's why it's a really good idea to use experiences, personal experiences, as evidence for what we're saying, because we know that our opinions are based on experience mostly. So my suggestion is for the first body paragraph, as the evidence, try to have a personal experience. Okay, so that means talk about you, talk about somebody that you know, something that you saw. And this is a great thing for content because it helps you obviously support what you're saying. Remember that part of the rubric, the way that they evaluate your response, is support and development, right? It's not just saying something, but it's developing that idea. So it's good for content, and it's also really good for grammar and vocabulary. Because by giving personal experiences, you can use different grammar structures. For example, you could use more than one tense, right? If you're going to talk about one experience in specific, you can use different past tenses. You can say, my personal experience plainly illustrates this reality. When I was a teenager, I don't know, I had this friend, right? We're going to be very specific, right? But I'm just giving you a general example. So when I was a teenager, I had this friend, and she soon find out, well, yeah, maybe I had this friend, and I lied to him or to her about this thing, and she or he soon found out that I had lied to this person, and our relationship ended. So as you can see, I'm using different tenses, right? I lied to my friend. Maybe I was doing this. He or she found out that I had been lying. So you can use different tenses, different grammar structures there. You can use conditional sentences. You can say, so if I had been honest with this person, maybe this relationship would still, or this person would still be part of my life. So you can use different conditional sentences. You can use complex compound sentences. It really gives you the chance to use all that grammar and vocabulary that you need to use to get a top score, right? Especially if you're looking for that. So it's a great idea to use personal experiences as part of the evidence in the first body paragraph. It's not the only way. You can also talk about general examples. So you could talk about people in general, so teenagers in general, right? So you could say, for example, teenagers are, I don't know, tend to lie at this age about these things, right? Tend to lie to their parents about their academic performance at school, for example. So I'm talking about teenagers in general. In that case, you won't use as much grammar as a personal experience, but it's still valid for an example. And the other option is to mention facts, evidence like statistics, studies, researches, but that's something that I'm going to suggest that you guys do in the second body paragraph, not in the first. So since we are in the first body paragraph, then my suggestion is to go with a personal experience. Okay, guys? Now, as Matilde was saying, this personal experience has to be closely related and directly illustrating what you're saying in your previous sentences. So that's why we're narrowing this thing down, right? So you're talking about romantic relationships and friendships, then ideally your example should be about that. Should be about maybe a friendship that you had that failed because of a lie, right? And maybe you can then say how, or you can compare it to another friendship that you had, which is a stronger relationship because of the honesty between you two, right? So the important thing is that it's closely related to what you said before, that it serves as an illustration for that, right? You cannot give as an example something entirely different. Is it okay? Any questions about that?
I have a question. In this part of the writing, the tense that we have to use is present, yeah? Or
What part of the writing do you mean?
all the program, all the
tense?
yeah.
Well, there's no rule for that. I mean, you have to use different tenses depending on what you're saying, right? So in general, remember that the simple present is used for talking about routines. So if you guys are gonna talk about your routines in your example, then you would have to use the simple present, right? So for example, every day I wake up at 6 a.m., I go to the gym, I do this, I do that, that's simple present. So simple present is used for routines. And another way, another use of the simple present is to talk about opinions and facts. So when you guys give your opinion, you have to use the simple present, right? When you say you become a reliable and trustworthy person, that's an opinion, right? So it has to be in the simple present. So when you talk about opinions and facts, use the simple present. But obviously, if you're in the example and you're talking about a past experience, then you gotta use other tenses, right? You have to use a simple past, depending on what tense you need, right? If you're talking about like something that was happening in progress in the past, then you have to use the past progressive. So it's not that you have to use the simple present or that you have to use the simple past, but it depends on what you write. So as a general thing, in your introduction, you're mostly just writing about facts and opinions. So everything should be in the simple present. In these two first sentences in the body, again, you're talking about facts and opinions. So it should be in the simple present. Now, depending on what you're gonna write about in the third part, in the evidence, you are welcome to use different tenses, right? Depending on what you need there. So it is according to the grammar rules, right? Of when to use different tenses. That okay? Any other question?
Thank you, Andy. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, guys, great. So, this class, I didn't even realize that it was time already. So we're gonna have to leave it here. We're gonna continue tomorrow writing the essay. We're gonna see the continuation of the first body paragraph in the second, in the conclusion. And we'll see. Okay, guys, any questions before we go? Hey guys, and please don't forget today's survey. And I will be seeing you all tomorrow in class. We'll continue working on the same task.
Thank you, Andrea. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.